holding them accountable.
They say we're going to change the way Washington does business. That really translates into is we're going to do nothing for nobody.
The corporate greed is just out of hand.
You keep messing with the school loans.
He said he's going to get rid of Planned Parenthood.
This sequester is going to slash programs.
Keeping them honest.
Gay and lesbian Americans have exactly the same rights.
Closing corporate tax loopholes and really some fairness.
One reason why the Republicans hate government so much because they're so bad at it.
The Agenda.
Welcome back to The Agenda, Sirius XM Progress 127. I'm Ari Rabin-Havt. Happy to welcome to the program right now Brad Woodhouse. Brad's just recently left as the Democratic National Committee's communications director and is back as executive director of Americans United for Change, where he will continue the fight. Brad, welcome to The Agenda.
Hey, Ari, thank you for having me.
So the president will go out today to begin a series of economic addresses, and the Republicans' response seems to be, let's continue to block America let's continue to block our economy from improving. How are you seeing it?
Well, look, I think it's out and out sabotage. I mean, if you look at, you don't have to, but you can go back to the very beginning of the president's first term. The Republicans said that they wanted the president to fail. They wanted to sabotage the economy so he couldn't win a second term. I mean, look, I think all of us were maybe naively hopeful that, okay, now he has won a second term, so just get over it. He's going to be the president. Help us move the country forward. It'll benefit you, by the way. You're in charge too. You run the House, but they're not interested in that because I think it's even more now than just their hatred for the president. They have a caucus now in the House that is so does not believe in government for anything that they really want to just gum up the works and not do anything, even if it were to help some Americans.
Well, Brad, but you do have to give them credit for one thing. And I think they've brought America together because as of this morning, 83% of Americans disapprove of the job Congress is doing. So you do have to give them credit for bringing America together, at least on the fact that we hate Congress.
Well, I guess if they've accomplished something, they've got Democrats and Republicans to agree that Congress is completely dysfunctional, and it is a shame because, as you know, and you've worked with people up there are good people. There are people who want to accomplish good things, and it was not that many years ago, Ari, in this town, where there were things that weren't that controversial. Making sure that bridges didn't collapse into rivers wasn't that controversial. Making sure that good roads were funded and good infrastructure was in place, and that high-speed rail, for Christ's sake, wasn't that controversial. But when this president proposes it, when a Democrat wants to do it, Republicans resist it for sheer politics.
What amazes me, and Americans United for Change has a great video on their site about this, and that's at AmericansUnitedForChange.com, right at the front, all the wasted votes to roll back Obamacare. But what strikes me is Mike Lee of Utah is now saying he's going to shut down the government unless he gets his way and Obamacare is repealed.
Well, that's right. This whole threat that they're putting over the American people's head about shutting the government down, about not increasing the debt ceiling, which would, in essence, shut the government down. So they got two opportunities to do this, and they may do it in one fell swoop. One is not to fund the appropriations bills that fund the government for next year. The other is not to increase the debt ceiling so that the government can borrow money to fund operations. I mean, we are and have been going back into the Bush years. We have been in a mode where we do deficit spend, and look, the Republicans have been in charge in years for the House now, and they have a responsibility to pay the bills. These are bills that are incurred because Congress appropriates money, because Congress approves money for spending. And this threat, on the one hand, John Boehner, Ari, will say, well, we're going to increase the debt ceiling at some point because it would be a calamity to the economy to do otherwise. But then he says he's going to hold it over the president's head and force him to negotiate. Well, I was in a meeting with Gene Sperling last night. they absolutely 100% aren't going to negotiate on something that Congress is Congress's responsibility to do.
That's the issue here. Is previously in previous generations, and you pointed this out, congressmen felt, look, they had a loyalty to their party and they wanted to win elections, but when they got to Washington, they had a job to do, and their job was to work for the benefit of the country. That attitude, what changed that attitude in your mind in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think a few things. I mean, look, I don't know if you can completely draw it to the emergence of the Tea Party, but I think there were enough people elected from such a strict ideological base, or in some cases, I think they're just extreme. I don't know that it's as principled ideology as they would like you to believe, and I also think there's a lot of hatred for the president, and they don't believe government should be involved in anything. So they don't believe that they're coming up here to do what's good for the country by making sure that Meals on Wheels get delivered, or by making sure that student loan rates are kept low, or making sure that Medicare prescription drugs are as inexpensive for seniors as possible. They don't see that as their role. They see their role as proving that government doesn't work, and it's perverse, right? Because they defund, they cut stuff, they impose a sequester, then they make it harder for government to do things, and then they point and say, well, government's not doing what it needs to do. It is a perverse approach, and it's hurting the country.
To me, it goes even deeper. 20 years ago, you had people like William F. Buckley, who, there's nothing I could find that I probably agree with William F. Buckley on, but he had a coherent ideology about what it meant to be a conservative. Today's conservatives, I feel like, look at what Barack Obama does, or look at something they perceive Barack Obama did, and says, oh, we're the opposite. And nothing to me strikes this Obama phone thing, right?
Right.
Where now you have Republicans saying we have to cut the Obama phones. Well, they're actually Reagan phones, because it was Ronald Reagan who did the policy. And just because some woman on some random YouTube video was screaming she got her Obama phone, suddenly the Republican Party and Republican congressmen have to come out in opposition to it just over that perception. And look, these type of things hurt people. That program helps a lot of people in this country at no cost to taxpayers.
Well, that's the incredible thing, right? Is that this is an example of something that's no cost taxpayers. It's an example of something that was started under Ronald Reagan, expanded under George W. Bush, was a critically important program. The cell phone nature of it is a critically important program after Katrina. But anything that's one of the things I don't know. I mean, why is it? Why else would people oppose things like you said, other than the fact that Obama is attached to him? There just seems to be this pent-up rage against Obama in these Tea Party districts in particular. So, if he came out and said, and let's cut taxes for the 1%, well, we can't do that because President Obama proposed it. It is, it is really unfortunate, because this is, as we all know, the president is a very, very pragmatic person who wants to get stuff done. He's not proposing wide-eyed liberal solutions to what to the country's problem. But Republicans, it's the same thing on health care. As you know, health care, the type of health care that passed was the type of health care that Republicans embraced. Type of health care Republicans embraced when the Clintons were in office.
And it's like our friend Paul Begala likes to say, I support a Republican gun control program. I support background checks, the assault weapons ban, and the Brady bill, all of which were Republican programs and supported by Republicans until recently.
Well, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, and it would be, look, I think the true test is, here is, is we get into the fall and you're facing, these things are no longer theoretical, and we're going to have a budget fight. We're going to have a fight over the debt ceiling. We're going to have a fight over replacing the sequester. Now, there will be a number of Republicans. Incidentally, I don't think all Republicans are this way, but I think the leadership in the House in particular feels like that there are enough votes among Tea Party Republicans that hate anything Obama proposes or does, that they're afraid of their jobs in leadership. Those Tea Party members are actually afraid of doing anything reasonable because they're afraid of being primaried. But at some point, they got to do something. They have to fund the government. They got to deal. They got to deal with the debt ceiling, and some of them want to deal with the sequester. Some of them want to, replace some of the defense spending. Well, that's just not going to happen. Democrats aren't going to allow defense spending to be increased, and Meals on Wheels, and teachers in the classroom, and those type of things to remain to be cut. So, the rubber's going to hit the road here, and there's a lot of posturing right now, but the rubber's going to hit the road here in a few months.
Right, and the rubber's going to hit the road in a few months, but out in the country, people are getting really hurt. People who depend on Head Start as a place to send their children are finding that next year, when they're in September, they're not going to have that Head Start program. Grandmas aren't getting Meals on Wheels right now. Like, this is really hurting people.
Well, and that is that's one of the most frustrating things, Ari, about living in Washington, where 1 minute people are swept up in a scandal that was actually made up by the chair of the House Oversight Committee and intentionally
which one
imposed. The IRS one. I mean,
I'm just which one, meaning which one of 30.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So they go between that. And then you turn on cable news, which would be great to be discussing some of these important issues and maybe going out and interviewing some people who are being hurt by the sequester. And then they're all, with all due respect, we're spending days talking about the royal baby. I mean, let's take a real, used to be some good investigative journalism, especially on TV, that would go out and uncover the true story behind what Congress has done. They do a great job going out and saying. They did a great job going out and saying, there was this wasteful project that Congress funded, which became the cause du jour of the media. I think to the detriment of some very good projects that were funded by Congress through earmarks, which is a dirty word, but those went away. Those used to help grease relations between Democrats and Republicans and presidents and Congress, and now we just. I hear people say it's no fun to serve on the Appropriations Committee anymore. I mean, all they do is cut, and no one, very few people ever won a campaign for Congress going home and talking about how much they cut instead of how much bacon they brought home. But there's no perspective in this town about, well, what is the actual end result of this? I say, well, there wasn't a big kerfuffle in town over the sequester after it took place. It didn't affect Washington. Well, if it didn't affect Washington, so it didn't matter, and that's just not true, and that's one of the most frustrating things.
Well, I think you make an important point. John Boehner is actually some of his own policies have hamstrung him in his ability to control his caucus, whereas Dick Armey and Tom DeLay could say, you're not voting with us? Well, all that pork you wanted for your district, see you later.
Right.
They had that power to do. John Boehner doesn't have that power, can't keep control of his caucus, which is why I think he will go down in history as perhaps the weakest speaker ever. Well,
and he's almost telegraphed that he wants to be a weak speaker. He's decided that we're going to let the caucus decide what our priorities are. Well, then why elect leaders? I think you're absolutely right. Whether it was Denny Hastert or whether it was Newt Gingrich or his leadership team, and look, Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker, running the House takes a strong speaker, and if you're going to get your party's agenda accomplished, it takes a speaker who can demand loyalty from members. Now, that doesn't mean that members aren't given a pass. It doesn't mean you don't have to work with the other party to try to get some of their votes. But it means you can't just sit back and say, let the backbenchers run, and let people with very extreme ideologies and ideas who are only concerned about whether or not they get primaried, let them run the place.
Well, and that's the problem. You have there's no fear of a Democrat in a lot of these districts. So the only fear is somebody far to the right. And what you've seen, at least on the Senate side right now, is Mike Enzi is not the 8th most conservative senator, is not conservative enough. So you have to bring up Liz Cheney to run against him.
Right. No, that's right. And that's, and that makes it complicated, makes it nearly impossible. Makes it nearly impossible to get anything reasonable compromise somewhere in the center. Makes it nearly impossible to get anything done.
Well, that's what you do, Brad. You get things done at Americans United for Change. I want to thank you for joining us today on the agenda.
Hey, thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you, and we'll be back here on SiriusXM Progress 127 after these words.